Okay, I'm having like some crazy technical difficulties. This is so nutty in here. So we're gonna start over. Hi, Star People. What's up? What's good with you? You want to read a book? The whole reason. Okay, so I started over on the Stellar Trilogy series page, and that was kind of a weird disaster thing that was going on. So I decided that I'll do it over here. Just bear with me. I can't even talk, so I'm supposed to be reading. Technical difficulties abound. So we're gonna. Hi, Corey. How are you? So I'm gonna start from the beginning. Not really. I'm just gonna give you a brief overview so that we're not starting this blind. This is my second time in the world using Facebook Live, so I'm not used to it, so just bear with me, but we're gonna get through it. We are. And if you're wondering about what's going on here, today is the new moon, and on the new moon I always do a new moon bath, which is like an oxygen bath. I'm such a hippie, man, I swear. It's an oxygen bath, so it's bath salts and baking soda and peroxide, and you take a bath, and that's how you cleanse. And I smudged. I did the whole white sage smudging. Like I'm clear, and I smudged my room nice. The energy, the vibe is good. We're good. So if you are not familiar with my series, the Stellar Trilogy, this is book 1, and it's backwards, I think, to you, but you get the gist. It says the Stellar Trilogy, and this is kind of where it all started. 1,000 years ago, I wrote a book that scared the shit out of me, and I wrote the bones of it, but I was too scared to do anything with it. Like, I just kind of had it in my laptop. It was funny because when I was first writing the book, I had one of those little Via laptops. It was actually kind of like this size, and when I was writing it, I would carry the laptop around with me like this, like the Men in Black were coming for me. It was very funny. Anyway, honey, oh, the bath, Corey? Yeah, the bath is stellar. Look at that pun. Okay, so this is the first book. I'll read just a brief snippet of the back of it so you kind of know where we're going to. What would you do if one random summer day an angel crossed your walkway? For one young woman, this angel is the very last thing on the planet that she wants to meet. And for good reason. His presence signals the end of the normalcy she has desperately strived for all her life. Add to that, he delivers a part of her birthright, a star-shaped light on her forehead. He also brings the beginning of something far more grave for more than just her. In book 1 of this magnanimous trilogy, we meet Kai. She isn't really from here. She thinks she is, but she's actually a part of an intricately planned recognizance mission to retrieve her father and return him to their people. The thing is, thanks to her abuse of surrogates and an anger plague ravaging the earth, Kai doesn't remember a thing about her mission. But she has to. The fate of the earth depends on it. Dun, dun, dun. And so that's pretty much, book 1 is kind of like Kai figuring out that she's an alien. But the good kind of alien. Like a fun alien. Like a dope alien. And then we move on to book 2. The reason why I stopped that is because I don't want to give anything away. If you plan on reading it. So, hey Duke, how are you? I don't know what that says. Whatever that says, but hi, you too. Let me see. So book 2 kind of takes what happens in book 1, and then of course it expands upon it, and I'm being very strategic here to not give it away in case you want to read book 1 and book 2 on your own. But I might, depending upon how this goes, I might do another book series with the first and second books, but we'll see. We're not there yet. So book 2 is the next phase, which was funny because remember I told you book 1 scared the shit out of it, scared of it, wouldn't do anything with it. But once I published that one, it was like all of these books just started coming. So it was like book 1 and then book 2, which is just shy of 350 pages. And then book 3 was just shy of 400 pages. Like, talk about somebody that just, once you get on the bike, you just go. That's me. So this book starts 7 years later. Kai, once so strong, confident, and brazen, is now a woman on the brink of breakdown. What she does not know is she is still as much a part of that reconnaissance mission as she ever was. But the rules have changed. The dream she lived so many years ago was actually a blueprint designed to prepare her for what's to come next in her real life. In this leg of Kai's epic journey, she meets the biological family she never knew she had and travels to the land of her true people to meet the moon and claim her birthright, a vital step towards completing her mission. The only thing standing in her way is a rogue umpshy monk, we'll get to that, and a dubious band of apocryphal beings called the Dozen of Durg. Now, the Dozen of Durg are very important. The Durg have returned to complete their own mission of destroying the earth and all of its inhabitants. Kai must learn the ways of the Stai to acquire a series of talents she needs to complete her purpose. Only then can she and her family return to earth, balance the Entwine, and save the planet from the Durg. Holla back. So, this is where Kai gets her wings. And I mean that literally. And now that you have some background, so you're not coming into this blind. Hi, Cedric. What's up, Bo? We come to book 3, which you can't see. Is it still backwards? This is book 3. This is what we're going to start today with the prologue. And so I don't even need to give you any background because we're just going to dig right in with the prologue. This is day 1 of, we're doing this the whole month. I'm going to try and do it every day. You know, bear with me. I do have a child, so it may not exactly happen every day, but the goal is to do it every day. And maybe it'll be Monday through Friday, and then we'll have the weekends off so that you don't have to feel like you have to stop and, you know, whatever. Because once I get started, you're going to be into it. Don't even play. You're going to be here at 11:11, holding your breath like, when is she starting? I'm not playing. It's good. So, you ready? Prologue. Dark. I've learned silence from the talkative, toleration from the intolerant, and kindness from the unkind. Yet, strange, I am ungrateful to those teachers. Khalil Gibran wrote that. Kai was seated at the news desk of a prominent TV station. The cameras were on her loosely, if only because the focus of this event was on the show's host, Ben O'Malley, not on her. Ben was something else, honey, as Kai soon gathered. He was known to be loud, obnoxious, and obtuse. He literally crafted his career out of over-talking and belittling his guests, to the point that most of them would resolve to merely sit in the seats reserved for them with blank eyes and bland smiles for the exposure. Ben O'Malley was that kind of rude that people avoid if they can. But he hosted a show on national TV, The Ben O'Malley Show. Does this sound familiar? The TV station his show aired as a whole was known for covering stories with a slant that showcased their blind, bigoted viciousness. It was a body of work that came off as just plain mean and backwards. But it was a tremendous opportunity simply to be seen in that circus seat. No matter how horribly he treated the people who agreed to be there, other people would take the same seat the very next day to be treated similarly. Ben actually liked watching his guests squirm in their seats like they were dancing for him. His audience loved him. Ben parroted their narrowest points of view and lowest vibrational stance. He gave their ignorance value, and thus he gave them a voice. Ben also loved the attention. He, in his mind, was a star. The irony of this was not lost on Kai at all. She knew the significance of stars and star people in particular. She knew both of these actualities weren't anywhere near possible for Ben or the radar of his audience. She knew that before the people of the dying world would remember their heritage, they had to face themselves. And before then, Ben would have to face her, which was also ironic. I need some more light. She knew, based on Ben's reputation, that she wasn't seated adjacent to him to have her point of view honored when he spoke it, if she got to speak at all. And finally, she knew she was seated where she was for something else, something more, although she had no idea what, which, to be fair, was kind of the story of her life. Kai was sitting in Ben's circus seat to speak to the militarization of infiltrated police forces, that's key here, and the upswing of fatal shootings that appear to target humans with high concentrations of melanin in their skin. The police disagreed with this assessment. Ben agreed with their disagreement. Lots and lots of people disagreed with their disagreement. Necessarily, there had been an outpouring of protests, demonstrations, and calls for reform. There were angry people on all sides of the issue. It was, to be fair, a fuckery opera of fear and misunderstanding all around. Kai knew fear was a funny bedfellow, but that didn't matter. It appeared that things were escalating amongst the people. Ben O'Malley and his ilk were stoking fear's fire, causing things to get much, much worse. But then Kai turned up. She had not been associated with any organized group, but her voice was added to the mix of those speaking passionately about possibility for the future of the human race, if any. She was there on that day, supposedly, to lend some balance to the dialogue that was happening on the world stage. If she got to talk. Ever. Ben was truly hogging the discussion. It made her feel uneasy, like something was amiss. Plus, it was freezing in the studio. Unnaturally so. She wondered if it was Ben and the station's viciousness that left the atmosphere so bitterly cold and oddly clammy. She felt like ghosts had populated every blank space in the entire studio, making the air dense, damp, and hard to breathe. She looked around the set at all of the producers and assistants staring at her like their eyeballs were made from needles. She felt vulnerable. To contrast the set being so icy, her uncomfortability made her skin feel extraordinarily hot. Plus, she was pregnant. Stye pregnant, which, to be fair, was a whole other thing. It got so bad when she breathed out, a gush of steam pushed through her mouth. Great, Kai said in her head. Now I'll probably look like a dragon to these people. Give them something else silly to be scared of, she said to herself in her head. She sighed loudly. She turned to face Ben. Before she knew it, without even trying, she was staring at the side of his face, watching his mouth move. She realized she had no idea what he was saying, like he was speaking a whole undiscovered language. This, too, gave her pause. Okay, Ben. Am I supposed to sit through all of your bloated commentary with my mouth shut, or tell you what it really is? Waiting on you, boo, she said in her head, and finished with a quieter sigh. As the package ran of one of Ben's ridiculous segments, Kai rolled her eyes. Who of sound mind actually agrees to being abused by arguing with this fool, she thought. It was her Aunt Laura's idea. Sitting in that circus seat, now with steam filing out of her face, Kai had finally begun to think better of being there. The thought crossed her to dramatically upend her seat and storm out, but something inside of her told her to wait. Something was moving. Something had shifted in the studio, and she was to bear witness. The words, "Thy will be done," kept ringing around in her ears. Fine, she said in her head. When the video package finished, not surprisingly, Ben continued talking. Kai rolled her eyes again. While she waited for Ben to stop jabbering enough to ask her a question, finally, she quickly replayed the events that caused her to be at that station in the first place. Because what else did she have to do, right? She wrote a piece on her blog about the coming shift and consequent rise of the people during the transition. It was an inspired offering that she couldn't say for sure she understood. It was a list of sorts. Actually, it was more like points of growth that would be required of the people of Earth in the coming times. Her offering was well received and hailed by millions. She soon had a full speaking schedule and was invited as a guest on all sorts of programs. People wanted to know about her ideas and if she was some sort of a prophet. She didn't want to be the face of any new ideology, even though she kind of was on the low. That was the point of her even being alive, wasn't it? To help usher in and nurture the new Earth. Suddenly, she felt sleepy, like hard to keep her eyes open sleepy. In an attempt to keep pending snores in check, she decidedly went back to watching Ben's mouth move, which actually didn't help matters much as she hoped. Now, to her, it looked like he was chewing tobacco. She still couldn't understand most of what he was saying, so she giggled to herself and she imagined the Ben O'Malley as an outlaw with a spittoon. She was still vaguely in her thoughts and half giggling when O'Malley directed his commentary toward her. She hadn't heard his question, but she knew the answer anyway. Yes, she said, blinking herself out of her daze. Yes. O'Malley looked disappointed. He had asked his question, seeing that Kai was distracted. He was hoping to catch her off guard. Instead, he was caught. It took him a second to regroup. So, you do believe that police should be removed from their posts? You do believe that there is no further value in having police keep the peace because of these so-called abuses of power? Ben asked this question with more nastiness in his tone than was necessary, but also like he knew subconsciously that he was about to fall off a building. It was a dumb question. Maybe yes, she said. She began calmly, almost too calmly. In the coming days, they'll be unnecessary anyway. The type of militia that so many police ranks have become is outdated. It doesn't go with the times. Far too many officers have forgotten their humanity. Couple that with intolerance and lack of empathy and reasoning skills. Couple that with intolerance and lack of empathy and reasoning skills. War training and weapons of war for daily peacekeeping scenarios. Using the poorest people in the community as cash cows and suffering no consequences. No cause and effect within the law and the communities they are sworn to serve, she said. Are you convicting police of corruption? Is that what you just said? All police are corrupt? Is that your takeaway of what I said? Kai asked, smiling blandly. What is the saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely? I wasn't making an argument for corruption, but since you brought it up, I will say your reasoning is spot on. I didn't say police are corrupt. I was asking if you were saying the police are corrupt, he said. Actually, you asked me if I believe police were unnecessary in the coming times. I hadn't finished answering that question when you brought up your brilliant point that corruption, too, would add to the reasoning that in coming times we may evolve past the type of policing we know today, yes? Kai blinked after she finished and took pains to look Ben directly in his face for good measure. He looked like he wanted to say something, but he was breathing heavily instead. Kai smiled only slightly as she continued. So, we have the military style of policing communities, milking the poor for cash, corruption, and the lack of accountability. Couple that with intolerance and bigotry, and we got what we got. A Molotov cocktail of fear and pain that unquestionably leads to the kind of destruction no one wants to live through. It's happening now. There is a cause for every effect. Just because we don't suffer the consequences we should, swiftly and in fairness, doesn't mean we don't suffer them at all. Would you agree? Kai said this to Ben directly, but she didn't wait for him to respond. She continued. Then again, to continue to answer your original question, maybe no. We live in strange times, yes? There are still very good, conscious people who are very good and conscious holders of peace, which is the job description of police officers. These men and women will do well in the coming times. Luckily, we never worry about the lost ones. They will find their way eventually. We do, however, worry about the damage they cause on the path to finding their way. That's the problem. Drowning people drown people, she said. Her voice was so plain and soft, everyone in the room, even Ben, had to move closer to make sure they were hearing her correctly. Ben looked struck. He was rarely at a loss for words, but being in Kai's presence squeezed something in his spirit. Her frequency was so strong, he felt like he was being crushed against a wall. He could not breathe. Kai smiled at him while looking in his eyes. He coughed uncomfortably, trying to catch his breath. You mean to say, his voice trailed off. He was holding his throat. He wanted so desperately to go to commercial, but he couldn't even speak the words. I have a question for you, Ben, if you don't mind. Do you believe that all lives have value? She asked so matter of fact, Ben hardly knew he was being asked anything. Meanwhile, Kai sat smiling at him. He raised his chin, dazed-like, to answer. Of course I don't. Maybe he said it like this. Of course I don't. He said plainly, in a fit of honesty he couldn't control. All the producers in the studio gasped. A few giggled at the response. He looked around helpless but compelled, maybe stuck, where he was. Ah, that's a shame. Do you believe your life has value? I mean, we can only see the world through the same lens we see ourselves. If all lives don't share the same value, maybe at least your life has some, Kai said, looking intently at Ben. He wanted desperately to look away from her gaze, but there was nothing he could do except answer her. No, he said sadly. I don't see much value in my life either. That's something, isn't it? How we see the world through the same lens we see ourselves. So, why do you do this show? Why do you do this work? Why do you spew this hate? Do you know it's contagious? Yes, he said, squirming in his seat. Yes, what? Yes, I know it's contagious. I know people get hurt because of the work we do here, but I do it because I don't care about them. Any of them. I don't really believe any of the stuff I say on this show. None of us do, really. But somebody has to be the voice for fear. Fear is lucrative. We cover the other side of issues. Call us devil's advocates, Ben said, sounding weirdly triumphant. Kai choked loudly, knowing Ben didn't know the really real significance of his statement. Yes, she said, exhaling. Forgive me. Continue. Somebody has got to do the dirty work. Might as well be me. I know I'm going to hell. I'll be in good company, he said. No, you won't, Kai said pointedly. There is no hell. Not really. There's only the hell we force ourselves and those around us to live in. We make our own hells and heavens through our work. Hell isn't a place we go after we die. It's a vibratory frequency of fear, doubt, worry, lack, limitation, selfishness, ignorance, and greed. It's like a net that catches all of our awful, barren ideas and helps us build individual worlds around those barren ideas, in part through our conversations. You have helped build a lot of barren worlds, Ben O'Malley. No, there is no hell, but there are always causes and effects. There are always consequences for our actions. I will show you, and you will see, she said, finishing like she had just unintentionally unleashed a spell on him. Ben looked irritated instantly. A "how dare you" look spread violently across his face. There was something about Kai's brown skin, calm dignity, and almost royal tone that made him want to spit. Add to that his unintended honesty, and he was irate enough to allow his anger to spill over. His rage made him sound drunk. If I'm honest, honesty proves that pale people colonize the world for good reason. We know how to run a world. First of all, the concept of power is funny and stupid, brilliant even. It's a concept more than anything, a way to make people feel good or bad about themselves, based entirely on something arbitrary and impossible to change. And you bought it, all of you. We've been milking this concept of the superiority of pale skin for centuries, but it's more than that now. We know it's ending. Each of us can feel it. Our reign is ending and we're afraid. What will we do with our staged superiority when it no longer holds any value? People of other melanin don't know their own value until we show them. Until we take it from you and sell it back to you, he said. Then you see. But it's too late then. It's ours then, you see? We show you because you can't see it without us. You need us. But what do you know? We wrote the book, but you don't listen. Why won't you listen? The last shall be first and the first shall be last. Things got mixed up. Things are mixed up. How did things get so mixed up? Last shall be first and first shall be last. Know your place. Why won't you people do as you're told and know your place? He was in a full, foamy, drunken sounding yell. It took him a few beats to register his own almost coherent words. He looked surprised, as though he hadn't expected to say exactly that. Or like he was expecting whatever had possessed his body to show itself. When no such thing happened, he covered his mouth as a precaution. Kai's stiff smile loosened some. There's a guru on the earth plane who teaches her constituents, feel, deal, heal. It's self-explanatory, really. Admitting you have a problem is the first step to transcending it. Until we can face our truth, no matter how ugly or silly or misguided, the battle we fight on our insides will always reflect the conditions we live with on our outsides. Turns out you may reflect the audience you serve more than you had imagined. Like I said, drowning people drown people. Take a deep breath, Kai said, never taking her eyes off of Ben. He took a big, loud breath as he stood up from his seat with one of his hands still covering his mouth. When he was finally erect on the landing behind the news desk, he put his free hand over his mouth too. He looked around the studio, noticing that it was so quiet a pin could drop and it would sound like an explosion. He took in the horror on all the faces of the people he shared the studio and his career with. It was just too much. Without another word, he ran off the set. Kai's gaze shifted to the camera closest to her. Her focus was on the red, blinking light. She sat watching the light while the staff kept the camera on her. Every person in the studio was stuck still, staring at her. They were trying to piece together what had just happened. How the ever-talking Ben O'Malley had been silenced by his own words. Had they just witnessed magic? Was Kai a witch? The cameraman closest to her was trembling like he was about to have a panic attack. He was at least 7 paces away from where she was seated, but she could hear yelling through his earpiece, and she assumed his producer was telling him to stay on her. The cameraman, for his part, was whispering, "But I'm scared," he said, apparently thinking he couldn't be heard, like he was yelling in the quietest room on the planet at the moment. Some more yelling happened through his earpiece. Kai envisioned it was his producer telling the guy to suck it up. Meanwhile, the cameraman was literally losing his shit. No sooner than Kai looked directly at him, smiling brightly, the guy dropped his camera and ran out of the studio in the same direction as Ben. Without missing a beat, another camera person, who was obviously waiting for this exact moment, picked up the drop camera and directed the lens at her. The rest of the studio staff stood watching in awe, silently hoping she would do another trick. The lights started to flicker. Then the studio began to shake. Kai let the confusion play out for a while. She wanted the viewers to see her face and know that what they were experiencing was real. She was there, and they knew why she had come. After several minutes of silence and shaking and flickering lights and little red blinking lights traveling from camera to camera, she turned to face the nearest lens with a red light and said simply, "Basho de'in." That means it is done. Then, as if on cue, everything in the studio and the building at large went dark. She got up from her seat slowly. All the lights were out, but she could see perfectly. There were people scurrying around trying to find things, their phones mostly. But there were no tiny boxes of phone screen lights that popped on. Darkness was the only thing that was persistent besides the sounds of people trying to figure out what happened. The studio was pitch black. Not even a red blinking light survived. She heard someone a few paces in front of her ask in a panic, "Is it raining? A storm? An earthquake?" No, someone else answered. Just a blackout in the middle of the day for no good reason. You know she did it. Finished. Kai saw him look in her direction, but not because he could see her, but just because he knew which direction she was seated. Stop panicking, will you? The generator will be on any second. Don't act like blackouts don't happen in random. Everybody calm down, another person said in a definitive tone. She was sure. But this wasn't a regular kind of blackout. This was something else. Kai knew it, but she said nothing. She simply looked around at all the scared faces huddling in corners or banging into things as they blindly tried to find their way to a light source. Their electric doors were stuck shut because no electric device worked. Every single light in their building was out. They were as blind in that moment as they had been in every moment prior at that station, pilfering darkness to their audience, it seems, finally brought them appropriate conditions to suit their work. Kai laughed on the inside, if only because laughing out loud would make her sound smug and creepy. The circumstances were smug and creepy enough. The irony was priceless, though. Kai stepped off the landing where the news desk was perched, walked through the open spaces toward the locked studio door. With little effort, she opened the door and walked through to the dark hallway. She stopped and turned around mid-stride to say, "This building is as dark as your work. If you want the lights on, you have to be the light you want," she said, matter of fact. She left her words to stick out in the darkness like a Times Square billboard. She left the door open, but no one followed her out. They all stood and sat paralyzed in the pitch darkness, listening to the click-clack of her heels down the long hallway. They all jumped with the thrill, with the shrill bing of the elevator. Their bones churned with the mechanical sound of the elevator as Kai made her descent to, presumably, the lobby. They all were stuck, right where they stood and sat, in the darkness they created and perpetuated. It would have been easy for them to simply get up and follow Kai out, but they didn't. And there was no rational reason why they all stayed in that room and didn't move. There were hundreds of other employees in that building on that day. Kai was a guest on that show that aired on that channel, born in that building that went completely dark. All of those people, including Ben O'Malley, sat waiting for the lights to come back on. When the doors of the elevator opened and Kai stepped out, the lobby looked like the sun was sitting in it. It was a stark contrast from the rest of the building. There was absolutely no bustle. The building was as quiet as a cathedral in the dead of night, but the lobby was as bright as all of Aphrodisia. As she got closer to the front door, she nodded and smiled at the same grinning security guard seated at the entrance desk when she arrived. She didn't stop. The click-clack of her heels was the soundtrack to how briskly she wanted to get out of that building. Like the ghosts that plagued the studio were on her heels. The security guard stood up in all of his broadness, which caused his large black star neck tattoo to become visible from his shirt collar. She picked up her pace toward the door. The guard marched from his post and followed Kai through the thick glass door she opened quickly, like the bleak darkness of the rest of Ben O'Malley's blighted building was also chasing her. And so that is like a Shonda Rhimes prologue. This is long. It's like a whole show all by itself. So that is the prologue of book 3, Light of the War. And tomorrow at 11:11, we will read chapter 1, which it's going to be fun. So while we're here for the next few minutes, do you have any questions? Anyone out there? Anyone? Any questions? If you have questions, I'll answer. You said that's hot. She reading a book, something different and very attractive. Well, thank you, Marcus Pepples. What's going on here? I said hi to Corey. Hey, Corey. Hey, Duke. Hey, Cedric. Hey, Imani. Hey, Raheem. Hey, Annie. Oh, you're welcome, sweets, for the literature. Any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Okay, no questions. So if so tomorrow we'll be back at 11:11. Prayerfully, they won't be the same technical difficulties tomorrow as I had today. Today was weird. It was very weird. I tried to do this on my Stellar Trilogy page, and it just didn't work. And so we'll do it on this regular page until further notice. And if you're interested in the Stellar Trilogy, you know, you can go on my website, envymckee.com, and you can catch up with book 1 and book 2 if you like. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow at 11:11. You can have your questions ready or not. Just have a good time reading. Make sure you have your Star People jammies on. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Mwah. Bye, Star People.